So welcome everybody. So we're going to be looking at the second film in the Indiana Jones film series, which has been given a Steelbook release, and that is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, yeah, I absolutely adore the artwork for this Steelbook release, and yeah, the reason why they've gone for this classic look is because when they originally released these films on 4K in the Steelbook form, in a box set with the third and fourth film, as well as the first and this film, they made some new artwork for it, which I don't mind. I think it looks okay, but a lot of people complain about it, and when you're spending that kind of money on, you know, 4 films on 4K in Steelbook form, they weren't really happy with the way it looked. So they've gone for this classic version in terms of the artwork for these singular releases, which I think are spectacular in the way they look. And yeah, that's the rear as well of it. With the map and the 3 stones that form a part of this film's plot. So yeah, this was released in 1984, once again directed by Steven Spielberg, who would go on to direct the third film. And yeah, it clocks in at 118 minutes long, had a budget of 28 million, so 8 million more than the previous film, but the box office takings were slightly down at $333 million. But even though that is less than the first film at 390, it was still far from a box office bomb and was the highest grossing film in the worldwide for that year. So by no means a bad box office taking there. And yeah, once again stars Harrison Ford in the lead role, as well as Kate Capshaw, who was also in Black Rain, directed by Ridley Scott, and Just Cause, that also had Sean Connery and Lawrence Fishburne. The latter of which I haven't seen, but the former was fairly decent. And it also stars K.Y. Kwan, who was also in The Goonies from the year later after this, as well as Everything Everywhere All at Once, which, yeah, was his first film in quite some time, and yeah, he was really rather fantastic in that, and it's easily one of my favourite films of the year so far. So yeah, this concerns Indiana Jones, who ends up arriving in India by some circumstances after being in Hong Kong, and he's basically asked by a desperate village to help deal with a cult in the area that has stolen one of their stones, which help vitalise the area in terms of crops, and you know, helps people in getting their food and whatever else. So yeah, although this isn't quite as good as the first film, it is undoubtedly a relentless entertaining effort that's helped along by the plot itself being barely a rerun of what was done before, as this feels more like a horror comedy than an action adventure film, although there are obviously action adventure aspects to it. And yeah, it maintains quite a lot of the quality of that prior film. The score is incredible, the cinematography is great, though there are far fewer action scenes in this in comparison to the previous film. They are still really rather well done. The plot is overall engrossing. It is daring in its depiction of violence, as this was one of the films in the early 80s that eventually led to the PG-13 rating being enforced in America. You can also look at the likes of Gremlins and Poltergeist for that rating coming along. And yeah, the pacing in this is overall is actually a little bit better, even though it's slightly longer. It successfully sets up the evil ways of the Fuggy cult, who have stolen one of the stones from this village. And yeah, the cast is solid, although I think Kate Capshaw could have easily been replaced by someone better from the time. I mean, for instance, we're looking at the likes of Sharon Stone, who I think would have also been good. And yeah, it has its funny moments, and the production is predominantly well done. Now, what lets this film down overall is the character of Willie Scott, played by Kate Capshaw, who is really rather underdeveloped. She's really not given much of a character at all, and for a large proportion of the time, she's either screaming or complaining or you know, just shouting, and it does at times get wearisome. But on the other side, there are plenty of times where she is really genuinely quite funny, especially in her reactions to things that are going on. And Harrison Ford plays off her really rather nicely as well when she's getting in these situations. So there's a bit of a compromise there, but I would have liked her to have been at least a bit more well written. Despite the action scenes being well done, they aren't quite as fun as before. The action scenes do take quite a while to get going, but when you're in the mine bit with Short Round, who played by K.Y. Kwan, he's doing his fight scenes, and there's a minecart chase and stuff like that. It does eventually pick up, but it does take a while to really get there. It has a few implausible moments that temporarily take me out of the film itself, and some of the effects are quite weak, especially when it, you know, ramps up the spectacle. It does feel a lot less grounded in comparison to the first film in terms of, you know, the effects that it tries to execute. But on the whole, still a fairly good film. It's definitely the weakest of the three, but it's still far better than that fourth film, which I'm really not going to mention as much as some people might, because I just erased that from my mind. But yeah, definitely the weakest of the first three. And yeah, there are elements to it where you could see it being improved, but on the whole, it's still a highly entertaining film. And yeah, it's been given a glorious 4K release. Just like the first film, it looks superb, especially because, you know, it's really well shot in the first place. So yeah, to be well shot and then have the 4K on top of that is really rather fantastic. Again, though, the discs haven't had anything put on them, which is a bit of a shame. I think that could have been done, because it, at the end of the day, looks a bit like it's just something that's been missed out. But again, like the previous film, you do get the poster of that film, and yeah, really do like it. Not as good as a poster as the first film, but still really rather good, and it's got a good tagline. If adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones. And yeah, adventure aplenty in this film, even though, like I said, it is a bit more of a horror comedy. But yeah, fantastic looking poster. It's going to go nicely alongside the first one, which will also go alongside the third one when that comes out next month in August. But regardless, really rather good film. Bit of a slump in comparison to the first, but not by a huge degree. And yeah, still an entertaining film overall. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.